Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lindsay Peoples, Editor-in-Chief of The Cut at New York Magazine.
Hello, hello, everyone. That episode was so amazing, right? Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Netflix. Thank you, Culture House. Producers of the series are here tonight, and I'm very excited for this conversation to celebrate Hip Hop 50 and obviously Ladies First, a story of women in hip hop. So I'm very excited to talk to some producers tonight. Let's welcome to the stage MC Lyte and Dream Hampton, our executive producer. That was only the first episode. There are 4 total episodes, all of them dropping August 9th. I was telling them backstage, I just want to binge all of them tonight. I think that it's such an amazing project. So congratulations to you both.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight on the opening night of MVAAFF. Yes.
I want both of you to tell me why this was so personally important, you to tell this story. Obviously, I think we know the industry really likes to say that they like hip hop, to say that they appreciate Black women, but often Black women don't actually get to be part of the storytelling. And so what went into it for both of you in realizing like we actually have to do something about this?
Yeah, well, we don't need permission. We are storytellers. Like, I love what Joan said about we were there from the beginning. There's this idea that this is just a men's game and women are in these supporting roles. That's absolutely not true about the storytelling, you know? But it's not true on any level. I mean, if Angie Martinez was here tonight, as she was gonna be, she was a B-girl, just like Sha-Rock, you know? So we knew. The episode that I direct, episode 3, is about erasure and equity. And it's like we just took the mic, you know? We knew that we had to do this. We knew that there had been other documentaries about women in hip hop, and they were good and that it mattered. I love the one that Ava DuVernay did. There are several that are quite good. But this particular moment in hip hop has never been seen before. Like, the most interesting thing happening in hip hop is women in hip hop. And that's new. That is a new moment. So, and I don't know how you feel about that, Lyte.
Just to participate in something of this level is just so important. I'm just glad that 50 years has arrived, and it feels as though I'm seeing more women within the last 5 years, but this being a culmination of many years of women from all over deciding it's time for me to speak up and being courageous enough to pick up the microphone. In Houston alone, there are 22 female MCs that have videos, that have records, that have managers, and they are doing it. They're not stopping. And so I think being involved with a project like this is documentation, and we need it along the way, because as she spoke to erasure, it happens, and I see people forgotten, which is why anytime I have the microphone, I'm bigging up Roxanne Shante, and I'm bigging up Sha-Rock from the Funky 4 Plus One More and Salt and Pepper. And, you know, there's so many that I love and adore that have come after me, but I need to make sure that I shine the light on those who were before so that they're not forgotten.
Lyte, I want to start with you. Tell me about the first moment where you really felt like you connected to hip hop on just a supernatural level.
Supernatural. Geez. Okay. I think it might have been somewhere between Rapper's Delight. For sure, Melly Mel instilled the storyteller in me. Hearing the message and him painting the vivid picture of the Bronx, which I had never been to up until that point, I knew that I wanted to be as effective. So that was an eye-opening moment for me. And then I would also have to say Sequence. They get overlooked a lot. Angie, Blondie, Cheryl, they all rocked that mic. They all had their own flavor and style. And I think through studying them, I realized that I could be every woman. Supernatural, she asked for.
I mean, Dream, how about you?
You know, in Detroit, where I'm from, we used to roller skate. Yes, Detroit. We used to spend a lot of time at the roller skating rink, and Apache, was a big song. Apache, jump on it. Y'all remember that? And of course, Bambaataa, Planet Rock. I had never heard anything like that. It was from outer space. If you want to talk about supernatural, it was like our generation's Sun Ra. And so, it excited me. Being from Detroit, I also didn't have a coastal allegiance. It's so funny for me to hear you say you hadn't been to the Bronx. That's so New York. To be like, I'm from Brooklyn and I had never been to the Bronx.
Wait, but Dream. Bronx people didn't come to Brooklyn.
I know.
And Brooklyn don't go to the Bronx.
I know. It's so funny. When I got to New York in 1990 and went to NYU Film School, I landed in a neighborhood in Brooklyn where, Chubb Rock, I lived on Cambridge Place, Chubb Rock lived on St. James Place, Daddy-O from Stetsasonic lived on Grand, and my neighbor, Christopher, who would go on to become Biggie Smalls, lived on St. James Place too, the other block, not where Chubb Rock lived. He lived between Fulton and Gates, and Chubb Rock lived between Gates and Green. And I remember Big's first, he was a friend. I gave, Puff his demo that Maddie C had picked him out from the unsigned hype pile. And I remember him going to the studio, Platinum Island recording for his very first studio session. He had done Real Love remix at Daddy-O's house with Stetsasonic, but he didn't know how to get to 4th and Broadway. I was like, just take the C and then transfer to the F, and, and do this. And he was like, you coming with me? And at that session, A-Sun was there, who went on to become Old Dirty Bastard. So that's my funny long story about a digression about people from boroughs not going to other boroughs. With all the name drops that I just dropped.
It's casual, I liked it.
But yeah, hearing Roxanne Shante was revelatory for me. I think I had to go back and hear the Pebbly Pooh, the Busy Bee. But we, not being from Detroit, we also listened to all the West Coast stuff early. So, I feel like this is awful to say, but I learned about sex from Too Short, I was like, trying to ask my older cousins, what does it mean when she's like, oh my God, and Prince. But yeah, no, I knew it was something different. I knew it was something that wasn't, it felt like our parents' music because we were sampling so much of it. We were sampling Parliament, we were sampling James Brown, but it felt completely new.
There's so much amazing talent in all 4 episodes. Obviously, I love Tierra Whack, love Rhapsody, all these people. What was your pitch to get everyone involved and to wrangle everyone?
Well, I told them that Dream was involved, and I told them that it was an all-women's crew. And yeah, when they heard that with Melissa, with a lot of I speak to a lot of them a lot of the time, but I'm never asking them for anything. So for me to ask them, hey, I need you to do this, they were open and made it happen. And I think they knew that this is history. This is a documented history that they are all a part of. And it's important because things change in this business so quickly that, a few years from now, maybe 1 or 2 of them won't be putting out music. And it's just great to be able to have it cemented in history. I mean, that's what I used your name. What did you do?
We used your name. I mean, once we got you signed on as an EP, I should also say I can remember exactly where I was the first time I heard Paper Thin. And you were like, is this a girl's voice? Is this what? Like, she's rapping so hard. I also remember
Paper
Milk
Thin wasn't really a hard one, though.
I know, but the beat was.
Oh,
and I remember and it was funny because so many times, particularly in what's called the golden era of rap, we think of women belonging to men's crews. So you think of Kim belonging to Big, you think of Fox kind of belonging to different crews. Definitely by the time Eve is being co-signed by Rough Riders, even Nicki Minaj, comes out being signed by, endorsed by Wayne and them. And Lyte, we knew there was a Milk D and Milk is chillin', top billing. But it was like Lyte existed on her own. Like Latifah existed on her own. Shante was kind of in that crew, but she was definitely in the Juice crew, but Shante was Shante, And yeah, so we wanted Culture House, Ray and Carrie, put together, like Lyte said. Their ethic in all of their projects is to have women-led crews. And we just had this young generation of these young, women who were on our staff, up and down it, just so excited about it. I had to be talked into it. It's been a long time since I've cared about hip hop. There are many times and places where hip hop has broken my heart. The very first thing I wrote ever was in 1991. I was the photo editor at The Source, and I was the only woman in the office. And Dr. Dre had beat up Dee Barnes. And Dee Barnes was kind of the Ralph she's in our doc, of course, and she was the Ralph McDaniels of the West Coast. She had a show at 20 years old called Pump It Up, and she was attacked by Dr. Dre. If you didn't know that then, you knew it because Eminem made fun of this black woman being attacked by this, 6'3" brother. And so I wrote an editorial in The Source calling Dr. Dre a bitch. And I was 19, and here we are, all these years later, and, you log onto Twitter and people are dragging Meg Thee Stallion for being shot by Tory Lanez, and I wonder how far we've come. I wonder if we've come anywhere at all. I often say that I grew up and hip hop didn't, that there's this kind of perpetual juvenile thing that's happening. And so that critical voice to me is important too, but it doesn't just happen from critics like me and Joe Morgan and Kierna Mayo and the people who were writing about it. It also happened from people on the mic, like Lyte, like Shante, like Meg standing up for herself in this moment. So, yeah, that was a long answer, but yeah, okay.
Good. Is there an overall impact or, honestly, favorite era from these 4 episodes that both of you just love so much without, obviously, too many sneak peeks because all episodes aren't out, but which era would you say is your personal favorite that you guys discovered throughout this process?
Well, just as a fan watching it, I loved seeing the footage of the older clubs. Of course, I had the opportunity to be at that same Latin Quarters that Queen Latifah spoke about. Every Tuesday and Friday is when DJ Red Alert would go on. But there was, the hip hop prior to that in the 70s, and seeing where Sha-Rock was on the microphone. There are some great photos and footage that I've never seen. So that was exciting to be able to see that.
Shout out to our archival team, Sarita Gates, who's super hype in all the photos. She's an incredible archivist. We don't divide the show into eras. So just like you have Rhapsody and, people in Tierra Whack who are right now being in conversation with Lyte and Latifah and Sha-Rock. So there's not, no episode is dedicated to a particular era, You mentioned Red Alert. I just want to shout out Jazzy Joyce.
Yes,
DJ Jazzy Joyce, yes. Because we've been on there's no place in hip hop where we haven't been. We've been the DJ, we've been the beat girl, we've been the MC, we have just been there. We've been the executive, we've been the critic. I like Right Now. I really do. I love Right Now. I love to have the, I grew up, this is my era. I graduated from high school in '88 when, Lyte was dropping, when everything was happening. But I also love the present. I just think that this moment, we talk about the golden era of hip hop, and people are talking about this era when you had Native Tongues right alongside G-Rap, right alongside Slick Rick. You had these different kinds of music. And I feel like women are doing that right now. You have young M.A., I love that you can be like out and queer in hip hop right now. Like, that's so beautiful to me. I can still remember, I can still remember a time when if you were in New York listening to radio, you might hop on to Wendy Williams talking about outing the gay rapper, you know? So I'm like so glad that is over. And for my peers that are stuck in this era of just ridiculousness, I feel bad for them. Like, you're like sitting around in your velour suit being homophobic in 2023. But yeah, so I like right now, because I think that Meg is so different from Cardi, and Nicki is still Nicki. Like, we've never seen anything like Nicki, quite frankly. And so this moment right now is deeply exciting to me. And I think of all the MCs I don't even know who are yet to come, you know?
Oh, that's beautiful. Obviously, this is about women in hip hop. What do you think about when you think about women and not actually being part of hip hop? Like, where hip hop would be if women hadn't actually taken a stand and said, you know, we have a voice and we want to use it? Where do you think we would be?
It'd be like a prison yard. I don't know, you know? I don't know. I mean, just thank God. Like, I mean, you know, I don't call hip hop a culture. I think that culture has food.
No, that's important to know, because I believe that I agree, and I believe that it used to be much more of a culture where you could get fed.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's lovely. I love that. And I did get fed from hip hop. I mean, my God, I wouldn't have known who Assata Shakur was if it wasn't for Public Enemy shouting out Joanne Chesmart. I told my mom I was going to be a vegetarian in 10th grade after hearing KRS talk about beef. And so, did anyone else do that? But you know, it's not like we had to enter it. What I meant by saying that hip hop isn't a culture, to me, I look at it as another iteration of Black youth culture. It's a genre of music that belongs. I love that Shante was talking about Nipsey Russell, you know? I love that she was shouting out that, because there's that tradition of the last poets. There's Gil Scott-Heron, there's Millie Jackson, like, you know, you talk about raunchy, like that's been done. Bessie Smith was doing that. So to me, it belongs to a long legacy. There's a chain of custody. And so we've always been, there's no Black culture without Black women, you know, and Black femmes, and yeah.
There's a quote in here where you talk about the sense of fearlessness that you needed and that you had to have to speak your truth. Where did that come from?
I think in there we talked about me attending Weusi Shule, which was a whole nother animal in terms of being in public school and then being in this private school, and what it was that was expected of us. And you know, I remember quite a few things, but just the curriculum in itself was very different from regular school. We ate vegetarian lunch. We had sorrel, and we sang redemption song, and we learned Black history. We did judo instead of basketball. We studied poetry from Langston Hughes. It was just a really different experience. And I'm sorry? Oh, Abarigani, yes, see? Yes. I feel like that school taught me how to, you know, not only stand up for myself, but stand up for others who need help standing up. And one of the very first times we went out on an outing, they had us make our signs so that we could go and protest on the steps of the United Nations to free Stephen Biko. And so these were the types of things we were challenged with in this particular school. So when it was time for me to take the microphone, I knew that I needed to say something that had some weight to it, something that was important, and something that was talking to my generation. And because drugs was just everywhere, and including, my mom worked at North General Hospital, and she worked on the 4th floor in Harlem, and on the 3rd floor was the rehabilitation center. And in order for me to see her, I'd have to go through all of them to get to her. And they were holes in legs. It was the most decrepit thing that you'd want to see as an 8 and 9-year-old. And I decided then drugs would never be my problem. And as long as I could speak to you and you could hear my voice, it wouldn't be yours either.
As we celebrate 50 years, I'm curious to hear from both of you, what do you think the biggest hurdles for women, and specifically Black women, have been in hip hop as we look through the past 50 years?
I was telling Lyte backstage that, were y'all here last year when they showed The East, the documentary about Waisha Shule, and yes, G2 and that whole crew from Brooklyn? That was real organizing against the New York public school system. And it wasn't just to protest what they were doing, but to build their own and to see Lyte be a product of that, and so many other people. So 50 years, I mean, you know, a couple years ago, Beyonce stood on Coachella stage and said, "I'm the first Black woman to headline this, ain't that some shit?" You know, like kind of pointing that out. So this question of equity, like, is still one. The record industry is awful to everyone. I mean, you know, Prince wrote "Slave" on his face. Michael Jackson was fighting to have 12 cents an album rather than 2 cents. George Michael's, Sinead O'Connor, rest in peace. Mariah, like, there hasn't. So the idea, this is an interesting moment because the music industry, with all its exploitative, abusive, like, patterns that are like systemic, has kind of collapsed, you know? So a lot of these artists don't have record deals, including someone like Beyonce, you know? So I think that part is gonna be interesting, how folks navigate questions of owning their art. That's an interesting question. But I also, you know, 50 years is also a time when I think there has to be some reckoning and some accountability. There have just been some things that have been unanswered for me. It breaks my heart to be up here talking about Planet Rock and, like, you know, knowing that, like, I still want Bambaataa to answer for these boys that have accused him of abuse, you know? I can say that about a couple other of the people that we consider the founding, you know, folks in hip hop. So all of those things I think are necessary, you know?
What was the question again?
What is the biggest hurdle that you've seen of women in hip hop?
Oh, the biggest hurdle. Right. You know what's so interesting? We're gonna take a curve. What you just said is, you said it was a few things, but one of them specifically spawned the thought in me that I'm headed to the Rock the Bells show tomorrow. Yes, LL Cool J, Run DMC, it's a whole lot of us. And there's paperwork and releases that need to take place. And there was a clause in the contract that said I had to be responsible for getting them the clearance for the music and the album artwork and the this and the that and the that, which none of it I own. So today is a great day for any MC, female or male, that they can own themselves. There are so many of us that are chained back in order for me to put out a Light as a Rock and see everything I can see from it, I have to re-record it, which is great. I mean, that's an option that we, you know, that I didn't have before. But the truth is, I do not own the album covers, which now every artist should say, I'm working with you as a photographer, we should share in the ownership of this photo so that when you are called upon to put your photo in a book, or when you decide to do a book of your own with nothing but photos of everyone who started this and they don't receive a dime, I'm not happy about that book. Like, I'm walking around, people can see me, I'm okay. And I got photos on IG, right? And that's not to be ungrateful, it's just that really the time has come that if you are making something off someone else, you should at least share in that with others.
Also,
Good luck, Rock the Bells.
Also, Rock the Bell should have somebody else doing that clearance work. I mean,
They did change the language, but it was what they serviced everybody who's performing, and it's up to those people to say, no, that's not my responsibility. I don't even know who took the picture for Light as a Rock, or any of those people were hired by the record label, and they were given the ownership. Not even the record label owns the photos from the album covers, which is really weird in itself, because they didn't know what to ask for. It was such a terrain where it was the Wild Wild West, and everybody was doing everything. And now, in order to get a clearance, people have to really do their homework and go back and find those people.
Well, last question. As we look forward to next 50 years, obviously we have 3 more episodes that we're all very excited to see. What do you want the legacy of this to be, and what do you want people to get out of watching this?
well, any time you're doing documentation, you're sending it out into the future. It's a time capsule. You know, I'm so grateful for Amir, for Questlove's Summer of Love, like, to look back at that. Yeah. For Marilyn Nance's Book of Photographs about that concert that happened in Nigeria in the 70s. Like, these are documents that, that we're just sending forward into the future. And also giving love, like, it was so great that these weren't prompted things. We weren't like, yo, could you give MC Lyte some love? Or yo, can you give, like, Shante some love? Like, women were, like, citation is a Black feminist principle, I believe, you know? And it is the answer to erasure, you know? And we didn't have to prompt any of the women in this documentary to cite other women. And so I want to pass that forward too, you know? When you're quoting someone, when you are building on some legacy, look back. Sometimes you don't even know. These girls are all like Latto, they all studied. Like, they may be from Atlanta, but they knew about, you know, 17-year-old MC Lyte in Brooklyn. They knew about, you know. So that's the other thing. Don't be a skimmer. Like, you know, do the work. And yeah, citation.
What she said.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you,
August 9th.
Lindsay. Thank you, everyone.